One of the most common topics I get across almost every single coaching client I've ever had is the idea of friendship and what it means. And the reason I think it comes up so often is because it's always some version of people being unhappy with their friends or how they're being treated or the expectations that they have towards one another. And eventually they reach a breaking point where they're so unhappy, they're considering just walking away from the friendship, or the other person has done that to them. I've been there too. I'm not proud of this, but I've done my fair share of ghosting friendships or people who really didn't deserve that. I've also been the one ghosted, which obviously didn't feel good to me either. Now, being the nerd I am, I like to sit around and think about why these kinds of things happen and what we can do about them. Because it's not like we just all of a sudden one day reach the point of being like, I don't want to talk to this person anymore. It doesn't just come out of nowhere. It's usually things have been building up for a while, and there's always a mismatch of some kind, usually in expectations and communication, which I think a lot of the advice out there on the internet and on other shows and on social media, these ideas are covered, right? Like these are not new concepts. But in my nerd brain, I'm like, but why? Why do these things happen? After talking about this with so many clients and my friends and even some of my family, I think I actually have some idea as to what's going on underneath the problem. So, this is one of those things where it's a problem underneath a problem underneath a problem. So, if you've also experienced a ton of friction in your friendships and you wonder why it's always so freaking hard to keep a good friend or to have friends that treat you right, then this might be the episode for you. Because I'm going to share what I've learned in my own life and my own relationships. And I'll also share some of the stuff that I've learned working with my clients. You're listening to This Is How You Think, the show that remodels your mindset. I'm your host, Jewel Kim. Let's dive in. A little over 10 years ago, I used to have this friend I knew from work. She and her boyfriend hung out with me and my boyfriend, both of these guys now being our husbands. So we would hang out all the time, and the four of us even vacationed together in Maui. She came to my wedding. She was one of the women who was involved in throwing my bachelorette party. And even after we stopped working together, we still hung out quite a bit. So on the surface, it looked and felt like a pretty solid friendship. But I think it was around 5 years in, I noticed something that had been true for a while, but it just took me a really long time to see it. And it was the fact that I was always the one reaching out. I was always the one suggesting that we get together, like every single time. Now, me being the direct and pretty literal person I am, like, just call me Drax from the Avengers, okay? As soon as I noticed this, I asked her about it pretty soon after. And when I did, she said, well, that's just how I am with everyone. I remember having this moment because I was just like, bitch, you are a liar. I know this is not true. And that is the moment when everything clicked. This wasn't actually a friendship. I was in a chase. And maybe you know the feeling too, where you're always the one initiating, you're always the one putting in the effort, and you know that if you stopped, you're pretty sure that the whole thing would just kind of fall apart. Me back then, I didn't have the vocabulary for this. And now I know that this is called a one sided friendship, which honestly sucks pretty hard because it's kind of lonely, right? I guess it's kind of like the situationship of friendships, maybe. Anyway, with this particular person, after I had that realization, I stopped reaching out. And as you can guess, she never reached out to me again, like not even once, which told me exactly where I stood. Obviously, it didn't feel good. Well, you know what's interesting is I didn't hold any bad feelings towards her. Like, I wasn't mad about it and I didn't feel betrayed or anything. Because I think deep down that I know that I'm always going to be better off with people who actually want to spend their time with me. Unfortunately, I think that some of us go through that particular scenario more than once, right? You would hope that we would learn after the first or even the second time. But for some reason, some of us keep repeating this cycle. And so that's the question that I set out to answer. Why do some of us seem to take way longer to resolve this and to create an environment of friends where we actually feel supported and loved and cared for? Why do some people have that and why do some of us not? And that's what brought me to the whole idea of what is a friend. So I did an episode way back when on what is friendship and why are adult friendships in particular, why do they feel so hard? So in that episode, I opened some loops on just getting people to consider what even is a friend and what do you need from your friendships so that you can feel happy in them. And that's the episode where it's pretty different from how my normal episodes are because I interviewed, I think, four people about their experiences with friendship because I thought it would be helpful to have people see that their experiences with difficult friendships or friends falling out of touch, these things happen to everybody. So hopefully, if you've listened to that one, you understand that you're not alone. But as my beautiful, lovely friend Lena pointed out, it's like, hey man, you opened all these loops and then you didn't actually tell us what to do. And I was like, oh, that is fair. So let me get into the main realization and insight. I mean, to be honest, there's several realizations I've had in my own life, which is why not only are we going to have this episode, but also one more on just how to understand friendships better so that you can have relationships and friendships in a way that makes sense for you so you stop feeling so like ugh about all these people. So going back to the friend who wasn't really a friend that I started off talking about, the main thing that I had to learn is that I never really established tiers of relationships. Okay, so in my mind, which honestly I think is a lot of people, I really only had three buckets or tiers of friendships. Okay, there were the people that I didn't know, then there were the acquaintances, and there were friends. And that was about it. Okay, I only had three buckets. This is where most of my problems with other people came from. Like this one thing. I am not joking, okay? The fact that I only had one bucket for friendship really made it a binary thing, right? You're either a friend or you're not a friend. And that's just not how friendship works. So, over time, what I learned to do is to develop tiers inside of that friendship bucket. I now have casual friends, I have close friends, and I have my inner circle. The inner circle being my core, my intimate. These are the people I could tell anything to, and I know that they would have my back. Why this matters so much is because before, when I didn't have these tiers in place, because I only had the one bucket labeled friendship, I was unconsciously treating everybody like they were in my inner circle when they weren't. That meant I was giving way too much of myself to people, like I was oversharing, but I was also overly generous with my time, my energy, access to me, and my resources. And this is why I didn't feel good so much of the time because it wasn't being reciprocated and it wasn't being appreciated. So it took me a long time to learn this. I had to learn the hard way that not everybody deserves all of me like this. And on the flip side, it is not appropriate for me to hold these unconscious expectations towards everybody, which is what caused more friction. And I think what was happening is that on the intellectual level, I understood that friendship is a two-way street, but I didn't actually get that. I didn't grasp the mechanics of friendship and what it really means, and that this is why I was so unhappy with so many of the supposed friends in my life. Okay, so that was the first realization, is that not everybody you call a friend belongs in your inner circle. And it's the fact that you're giving inner circle effort to somebody who's not actually in that circle, that's what puts you in the chase. Now, the second thing that I had to realize is the reason why you end up with people who are miscategorized, maybe you think that they're closer to you than they actually are, is what I call the proximity effect. So many of us, including myself, okay, we don't understand that a lot of the people we come across are the ones that circumstance handed to us, right? Like it's work or school, or your kids go to the same school together, or your kids are the same age. You're in the same season of life. These are the people you encounter through some common interest, but they slide into your life without actually earning the right to be there. Now, I'm not saying that you have to sit there and vet everybody like you're some kind of CIA analyst, okay? But I do think that the idea of who is a friend and who isn't, or what tier of friendship they belong to, it might be something you want to put some effort into thinking about, especially if you're unhappy with some of these people taking up space or presence in your life. And for me, whenever I end up in this kind of situation, which still pops up every now and then, I think like most people, when 2020 happened, I went through a major purge of my quote unquote friends or just people I knew. So that overhaul and that clearing out of certain energies that weren't serving me or weren't helping me grow as a person, that was a major step in the direction I wanted to take as the future me and the person that I see maybe 5 years from now or 10 years from now. But sometimes I still have these moments where I let the convenience of circumstance form these relationships where maybe they feel good in some moments and maybe we laugh and we have fun. But in other moments, I don't feel good. I don't feel good about how I'm being treated. I don't feel good about how that person talked to me. Or maybe I don't feel good about how they give me a last minute invite always, or they don't seem to actually consider what I would want. That's always a sign for me to take a pause because a friendship, like any relationship, has to be mutually beneficial. And I'm not talking about from a financial or some kind of transactional standpoint. I'm just saying I need to enjoy my time being in relationship with these people. I need to feel cared for and I need to feel respected and considered. But to what degree will look different depending on what tier of friendship we are in. So with my inner circle, if I'm going through a freaking tough time like the last year I've had with my brother passing away, yeah, you bet your sweet baby that I expect them to be there for me and to know to be there for me. But with somebody maybe that I only know from work or somebody I only see at the gym, yeah, I'm not going to expect that from them because that's not the relationship we have. It wouldn't really make sense. Anyway, all of this to say that as you're listening, maybe you have a friendship or two or several like this, and maybe you've been blaming yourself or them for not being a good enough friend or feeling guilty that you're mad at them. I actually don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think the fact that you feel some level of disturbance in the force is a sign. It's an indicator that you need to do something about this. Now, I highly recommend being the adult and putting on your adult pants and having the difficult conversation with them just so you can level set these expectations so that you can both feel good about where you are relative to each other. In the instance where maybe you're thinking about ghosting them, it is interesting because I find that behavior actually happens a lot more with the men that I know versus the women. I don't know what it is, but for some reason, women seem to want to verbally articulate the state of the relationship. They want to define it or set parameters, which I don't always have to have that level of clarity, but when somebody else wants that, I'm more than happy to give that to them because I want them to feel safe in being in a relationship with me. But men are funny because they usually don't do that. They seem to be a lot more like the Homer Simpson meme, like fading backwards into the bushes. So I think it's going to be up to you to decide how you handle this. Me, I'm more like Drax, so I tend to be very literal. I tend to want to say the thing on the nose just so that there's no chance for misunderstanding. But I also understand too, where in the instances where I've ghosted people and that is not me acting in my highest self, sometimes I will do that though, because the friendship tier that that person occupies, or maybe they're even just an acquaintance, I do not see them as worth the effort that I would have to put in to experiencing awkwardness and tension and having this potentially challenging conversation, especially if I know they're not going to take it well, right? So then I'll just write them off in my head. Now, as I get older, I do less of that because that doesn't align with the person I want to be. And I'm thinking about me on my end. If I care about the person, this is where a lopsided friendship can really complicate things because if they mean more to you than vice versa, then you would want them to tell you, right? But on their end, they may not want to invest that level of effort. And at the end of the day, sometimes the way I like to visualize this is friends are kind of like birds, where sometimes the bird will choose to nest in your tree, and then sometimes they fly away and leave and they never come back. But sometimes they do, and sometimes they never leave. But either way, I think it's really about offering the freedom of choice to these people and to yourself so that you can find the people who do want to be around you, who celebrate you instead of tolerating you, right? I think that's the goal here. So, as I close out this episode, I just want to make it super clear that this isn't about going through your friends list and macheting all the people on there. A lot of this work, I think, is just being aware of who you are, what you need to feel happy, and then maybe refiling some of these friendships, maybe moving them around to different tiers, and maybe even moving them out of the friendship bucket and into the acquaintance bucket. And that's okay. This doesn't have to be a breakup unless you really feel strongly that it should be. It's not my place to tell you what's right for you. But hopefully, this is a perspective that helps you look at the people you know differently and in a more productive manner without chasing. You don't want to chase people who are never in your inner circle. And let's be honest, they never belonged there. Alrighty then, that's it for this week. If you have any questions, feel free to hit me up on LinkedIn. That's always the best place to reach me, or text the link in the description. And by the way, if you have a minute, would you mind leaving me a review if you've listened to my show? It'll help me grow the show and hopefully make me look a little bit more legit. As always, thank you so much for listening. And remember, I believe in you. See you next time.